On today's episode, we talk about creating a realistic fishing bucket list, with the keyword being realistic. We look at how you can set goals that are fun to chase while still being within the realm of possibility. All that and more on this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. As always, we are brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. American Legacy Fishing is my favorite place to shop on the internet, whether I'm looking for brand new rods, brand new reels, line, baits, or used gear. If I have something that I've had in the back of my mind that I would really like to buy, I just don't want to spring the money for, I check their used page often because they're always updating it, and I found some killer deals over there on the American Legacy Fishing used page. They have the best selection of lightly used fishing rods and reels in the country on the internet, ready to be shipped right to your door. They also have an amazing loyalty program, the American Legacy Elite program. I've told you guys about that before. It is a no-brainer. It is the easiest $49 that I spend a year because I make that money back on pretty much my first order whenever I order back from them, because you get 10% back on every single order and free shipping with no minimums. That and a list of other benefits like a private Facebook group, exclusive sales and deals they send right to your inbox they don't send to anybody else. It's seriously a no-brainer for $49 a year that, like I said, the 10% back alone pays for it in like the first order or two. But they carry your favorite brands of rods and reels and everything. I mean, we're talking Shimano, Daiwa, St. Croix, Lew's, 13, G. Loomis, you name it, they've got it over there at American Legacy Fishing, and you can buy it from a great mom and pop Midwest tackle shop that actually cares, and not the giant big box store that doesn't know you from Adam and does not care about you. You are a number on a spreadsheet to them. Go shop with the folks where your order actually makes a difference. American Legacy Fishing, they're my favorite folks. I've ordered from them well before they were sponsors of this show, and I know they've become a quick favorite of a lot of our Tackle Talk listeners as well. So again, Tackle Talk 5 is your code over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. Okay, everybody. First up here, we have some sad news, and I'm never one to want to say I told you so, but folks, we told you so. So I tried to warn you last week that I had heard from multiple sources and I'd seen multiple emails from people in the industry, not American Legacy, by the way. I should probably preface that. I don't get any of this type of info from American Legacy because I never want to put them like in a weird situation. So these were sent to us by what I'll probably call just like anonymous whistleblower type people that, you know, work for some of these companies or work closely with some of these companies that just felt like passing some stuff along, it sounds like. So we got those first ones a while back, but I really try and wait until I'm pretty sure of something before we talk about it here on the show. And last week, I got enough info from other people to kind of corroborate it, and I felt comfortable kind of saying on the show that price increases were coming from Shimano and coming soon. And I believe last week we said that those could hit as soon as the end of the week. So last week on Tuesday is when we said that, and then on Thursday, which is today, by the way, I'm recording this because if you're listening to this when it comes out, I am visiting family down in Florida this week, so this episode was pre-recorded on Thursday of last week, but today, August 15th, when I am recording this right now, we got our first true confirmation that Shimano increases were coming across the board, and it comes to us courtesy of Bass Pro Shops, who was, as I understand at least, one of the first major retailers to actually make the new Shimano pricing public on their website. I mean, even Shimano themselves haven't updated these prices on their website yet, but Bass Pro Shops has, as of the time of this recording, August 15th. So let's hit this real fast because, like I said last week, I screenshotted every item's price before the increases, knowing that these were coming, and I wanted to see what they look like after so we could compare. So for the billionth time here, I'm not an economist, I'm not political, I don't care about any of that. Leave that stuff at the door. This is not a discussion on foreign versus domestic manufacturing or or foreign trade policy or things like that. I don't know anything about any of that stuff. I am just letting you, guy or girl listening to this show right now, know that you, guy or girl listening to this show right now, are about to pay more for your Shimano gear. This is just a PSA, nothing more, nothing less. So let's take a look at these price increases real fast. First, the Shimano SLX. Their flagship $99 reel is $99 no more. The Shimano SLX is now $114.99. So RIP to the trusty under 100 aluminum framed SLX, one of the last bait casters with an aluminum frame in the industry standing at under $100. Poof, is now gone. Now, it's still a great value at $115, but it sucks to see that price go up to triple digits. Now, in that same family, the Shimano SLX XT and the SLX DC both got increases as well. With the SLX XT, it went from $129.99 to $144.99. The SLX DC went from $199.99 to $224.99. Now, let's bump up to the Corrado family. The Corrado M went from $199.99 to $224.99. And you're going to see that throughout all of the Corrado family. The Corrado DC went from $269.99 to $304.99. And the DC 200, the bigger size of that, went from $279.99, now is going to cost you $314.99. The reels weren't the only thing. Rods got the increases as well. The Corrado casting rods look like they have went from their normal price of $179 to $199, depending on what model you chose. Those are now $234 to $264. And as we keep going up here, everything got an increase. You're talking Tranks, Miravel, Neck Save, Bantam, everything went up. The Bantam went up like $50. Basically, everything across the board got a price increase from Shimano. Now, ironically, the two things that I haven't seen the price increase on yet are the SLX rods and the X Pride B rods, because Bass Pro Shops, again, at the time that I'm recording this, still had the old price listed for both of those. The SLX rod that I looked at was still $99, and the X Pride Bs, they don't really carry the full lineup, so I couldn't get a clear answer on that as well. But if we do some educated guessing here, we can probably figure out what these are going to be, because the average of these price increases was about 15% across the board, give or take 5% here or there, depending on the product. But if we use 15% as our baseline, that would mean that you're likely going to start paying $115 for your SLX rods, and your X Pride Bs are going to go up to about $320. Now, that $320 X Pride B is the one that hurts me the most. Going from $269 to $320 is just a gut punch to one of my favorite all-around rods on the market right now. But there you go. Price increases are a-coming. Bass Pro Shops has already implemented them, and I would guess most other retailers are going to follow suit soon if they haven't already by the time you're listening to this episode next Tuesday. And the thing to remember here is this price increase is coming from Shimano, not from Bass Pro, not from Cabela's, not from American Legacy or Tackle Warehouse. This is coming straight from Shimano. So I don't think anybody is going to be quote-unquote safe from these for long. Now, that doesn't mean if you don't act fast, you might be able to still get a deal on them, because as I record this, there are still plenty of retailers that have the old pricing listed. American Legacy has the old price listed at the time of this episode. Again, I don't know how much longer this stuff is going to last, but if you can find them at old pricing, take advantage of it, cherish it, hold it tight, because it's just a matter of time, and you'll be wishing that you were paying that old price for your Shimano gear. Okay, next up here, we are discussing something that some of you might have already thought of or might already have. Some of you might not have, or some of you may have just never actually followed through with this type of thing. But we are going to talk about today creating your fishing bucket list. Now, everybody knows what a bucket list is. It's obviously a list of things that you want to do and cross off before you kick the bucket and die. But the problem with most bucket lists is they're not realistic. So many people make a bucket list with things that they would love to do in their wildest dreams, but let's be honest, they'll probably never happen. And that's where a lot of bucket lists fall apart for me. And you can say, no, Andrew, you're wrong. You know, a bucket list should be full of really high aspirational dreams and whatever you want to say. But to me, that's just making a list of things that I would love to do one day, but will never actually do. I, on the other hand, would much rather have a, quote unquote, more boring bucket list, but a list of things that I could actually cross all of them off. So a more realistic list of things that I can do or will have the means to do someday is way more fun to me than a list of a bunch of pipe dreams that are just never going to happen. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk through some of the things that have been and are on my fishing bucket list. And then hopefully that helps spur some fun conversations and maybe inspire some of you to do some of this as well. So to start off, let's talk about some of the things that might be a little bit more normal or cliche or whatever you might want to call them, things that frequently land on people's bucket list, but kind of my take on these. So number one was a big one for me, and that was my first muskie. Now, this species is going to be different for everybody, so don't pay attention to the muskie part as much as it is about a chase species. So muskie was mine. I really caught this bug where I got it in my head, me and Jeff got it in our heads that we wanted to go catch a muskie, and we wanted to learn and we wanted to see what, all the fuss was about, the fight, how big were they really, how big were their teeth, these things that just look like these sort of mythical creatures. We wanted to see one in person. And so we set out in our little 10-foot, plastic kayaks, fishing around with giant rattle traps or whatever, trying to target muskie. But that was the first big chase species for me where I really set my mind to it. And I said, I want to cross this off my bucket list. I want to catch one of these before I die. Now, little did I know that that fish would set me off on kind of becoming a full-blown muskie guy under bass. So like bass are still my number one target species. I would say muskie are probably my second favorite. So it did spur like a lifetime love of muskie after that, but it was a fish that taught me a lot, that was a whole lot of fun to chase. And I have to give some credit to the person that probably made me want to target muskie the most. And I may have talked about this before. I believe when we've had him on now twice at this point, I've probably brought it up to him at least one of these times. But Matt Streichel over at SB Fishing TV, he has a great YouTube channel. He's one of the OGs on YouTube. And he was the first person that really kind of showed me what muskie fishing was about. He did this series a long time ago on YouTube where he tried to catch his first muskie. And unlike a lot of these people where they go, oh, okay, I want to go catch a muskie, and then they show you the video of them catching a muskie, Matt showed you, I don't even know what it was. It felt like 20, 30, 40 videos of him going out and trying to catch muskie and not catching a fish. And I know to some people, they're like, oh, I don't want to watch a video of a guy not catch fish. But to those of us that really enjoy fishing and love the chase and love the challenge, and especially like this target species, it really showed what realistically it's like to go try and target muskie for the first time in a, pressured public fishery. It is going out 10, 20, 30, 40 times and not catching a fish sometimes. I experienced that, and watching Matt go through that really helped me realize, okay, this is what you're getting yourself into. So I know that is kind of a long tangent there, but that was my first chase target species. So I would recommend that you have a chase target species that's on your list of something that you want to go out and catch. Now that could be different for everybody. After muskie, it was brown trout for me for about a year, and that took me a minute to figure out because brown trout have all these different sort of nuances and where they sit in the river and how smart they are, how they know you're coming before you even ever get close to them. I learned a lot from brown trout as well, but I really would encourage you to pick some sort of semi-local chase species because it's a really good, realistic place to start. Don't pick some species that's halfway around the world or a species that's, 20 states away that you're never going to get to. Pick something that's around you that you've just never run into that you think would be a really fun chase and a really fun target. That could be steelhead, it could be stripers, it could be smallmouth for you depending on where you live, gar, trout, pike. Like there's all kinds of things that you could say, you know what, I've never caught one of these. I would love to really give this a go and I would love to knock this off my list. I think that's a really simple, easy place to start. Pick a local species and make that your chase species until you cross it off your list. Now, then that brings us to the chase of other species as well that might not be so local. And here's where you need to temper your expectations a bit, because I see a lot of people go, oh my gosh, my bucket list is to go to East Africa and catch GTs. Well, yeah, that would be sick. Objectively, we would all love to go do that. But you have to ask yourself, is that realistic? Is that really something that's going to happen in my lifetime. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, that's not going to happen. I mean, I'm lucky to get away from work and make it to Florida once a year to spend some time with my family for a week, right? I don't think a trip to East Africa is in my future anytime soon. Maybe it is for you. If so, I tip my hat to you. I am insanely jealous. Good for you. Because I mean, there's tons of species that if we were just making a dream list and not things that would be realistic for me to accomplish, then yeah, there's a lot of species on that list. GTs, golden dorados, tigerfish, bonefish, marlin, sailfish, in Europe going after zander, Goliath grouper, arapaima. There's so many that I would love to catch one day, but are not going to happen. So if I want these to be able to be actually crossed off my list, then I need to make them realistic. So for instance, my big dream would be to go to the Amazon rainforest and fish for peacock bass, like the big 10 plus pound, top water smashing wild peacocks that you see some of the videos of. That is like my dream, trip or target species. That is just everything that I love about fishing rolled into one. A giant river, giant top water eats that you're almost using musky gear on. Like that is just, if I could snap my fingers and take a trip, it is that. But I also know that is a huge endeavor. Like, I mean, we're talking, I don't even know what it is. You've got to be talking, $8,000 to $10,000 by the time that whole trip is said and done. That's not something I'm going to be able to do. I can't, take that week and a half, 2 weeks, fly out to the Amazon rainforest, stay on some houseboat, take a local guide out in a tiny aluminum boat in the middle of the rainforest somewhere for these fish, and then drop as much money on that trip as you would on like a used car. I just can't do that. Again, if you can, more power to you. Go do it if you have the opportunity. I just know that I don't. So instead, my realistic bucket list version of that, which by the way, I do want to cross off either this year or next year, and I've already talked to a couple buddies about maybe making this happen, but I want to go book a cheap flight down to Miami area with a few buddies, get a really super cheap hotel room, rent a cheap car, and then go hop around the canals around the Miami area and catch peacock bass from the banks. It still lets me cross off peacocks off my bucket list, but it's much more attainable. Because like I said, a full week in the Amazon, I have no idea. I've never researched this, but I'm going to guess it's like $8,000 to $10,000 by the time you pay for everything, food, travel, flights, the actual guide trips, tips, everything that you would have to do. You're looking at like high 4 figures, maybe low 5 figures by the time that's said and done. I can't do that, but I can take a long weekend, maybe take one extra day off work and use the weekend to my advantage, book a $50 Allegiant flight, split some cheap crackhead hotel room for like 20 or 30 bucks a night each if we split it 2 or 3 ways, split a rental car, that's probably another $20 a day or something, and then budget like 20 bucks a day for food. You could probably do that whole long weekend of peacock fishing in the Miami area for like $250 or $300 by the time everything's said and done with flights, food, hotel, car, everything. That I can do. So I would encourage you, see what you can do with a long 3 or 4 day weekend where maybe you take 1 or 2 days off work and you see if you can do a fishing trip somewhere in the United States for cheap and then cross one of those species off your bucket list. That's next up for me, Southern Florida peacocks. Okay, next up on my realistic bucket list is another simple one in theory. Again, maybe a little cliche, just like the first one, but it's to identify some of the bucket list fisheries that you want to fish. Now, that's different than chasing some bucket list species we talked about a second ago. This is purely about the fishery itself. So what is a lake or a river or an area that you've seen that you've just said, I want to go there and fish? It could be because of the scenery. It could be because of the remoteness. It could be because of the type of cover, the type of fishing that place sets up to do. It could be about the size of the fish that grow there. What is your bucket list fishery? And for me, my first one was the Susquehanna River. Being a river rat at heart, I desperately wanted to get over there and fish the Susquehanna. And last year I got to do that. And it was a ton of fun. It was well worth it in my eyes. That place just sets up like a dream for me and how I like to fish. That one's a little bit unique to me. I know that is not for everybody. There are way better fisheries in the country that people should and would want to go to. That was just kind of mine because of the exact way that I like to fish. That place sets up for it. So I crossed that off my list. Next up on my bucket bucket list is probably a true big bass factory southern lake fishery. So I would say right now on my bucket list is probably Lake Fork. I would say to go to Lake Fork in the spring where you can truly just like flip around and any cast could be a 10 plus pound fish. I think that's probably next up on my list because I've never experienced a giant, big bass factory like that before. So there's your next one there. Identify the fisheries that you want to fish. That's different for everybody. And it does not have to be across the country. It could be in your state. We have some great fisheries up in Northern Ohio that I've never got to go to. Those should be on my realistic bucket list of places that I want to fish. Okay, next up on my bucket list here of realistic things was one that I got to cross off a couple years ago and I've been able to do every year since, and that is to go to the Bassmaster Classic. I never really understood the love affair with attending the Classic in person until I did it, and now I'm hooked. And the whole fishing world just converging on one location and having, tens or hundreds of thousands or whatever it is of fishing fans all together is an atmosphere that you just don't get anywhere else throughout the year. And I'll be honest, I have been to multiple Bassmaster Classics. I've been to multiple iCasts. I would much rather go to the Bassmaster Classic than iCast. No question about it. The Bassmaster Classic is for the people, not for the who's who and, the influencers and the buyers and that type of stuff. It's for everybody and it's free, so it's accessible to everybody. So that's a very easy one to add to your bucket list if you haven't been already. Attend the Bassmaster Classic at least once. I'm not saying you have to go every year. There are definitely people that you can probably ask that say, you know what, I did it for 2 or 3 years and, it's something that I don't feel like I need to do every single year. Okay, I understand that. But if you've never been before, do it because it's awesome. And they're usually in a pretty accessible location with relatively cheap flights, or depending on where you live, it might be drivable. But just do yourself a favor and attend the biggest bass fishing party of the year at least once. Soak in the expo, the takeoff, the weigh-in at the arena, all with the big, giant LED boards and graphics and sound. It's just an awesome experience that I think everybody should do once. Okay, next up, this is one that was partial to me too, so I realized this may not be for everybody, but I'm a kayak guy. You guys know that. I don't even own a boat right now. I'm just a kayak guy, but I wanted to take my kayak to bigger water. And that's different than going to a different fishery or something. I wanted to push my boundaries in terms of where I could take my kayak and really not just be this small water guy. I wanted to get up to bigger water in my kayak. And for me, that meant the Great Lakes. So I kayak fish mostly little rivers and creeks and small lakes around here, but I wanted to do what I've seen so many people do for years. And I've been a little cautious to do it because I'm a little bit risk averse sometimes, but I wanted to take my kayak on the Great Lakes and I wanted to fish for smallies. And in the last 2 years, I've been lucky enough to do that twice. And while it can get a little sketchy if you're a beginner on a kayak, it's definitely not something I would recommend. But if you're an experienced kayak angler and you've never done it before, it's definitely worth looking into. Now, I have to stress over and over and over again, you need to be cautious. You need to watch the wind. One little change in wind direction could be very, very, very bad for you. That's something that I definitely underestimated. So watch your wind, watch the weather, be aware of boat traffic. Boat traffic can kill you. Have your flags and your nav lights, have your life jacket, go with a buddy, all the safety precautions you need to take, from a 0 to a 10, you need to take to a 10 because it is a matter of life or death when you get on bigger water like that in a kayak. But it was so much fun because it adds a whole different element to fishing. The waves are bigger, the water is bigger, but also the fish were bigger where we were at. So it's more of a step out of my comfort zone type thing. And I really think, without being too corny, that it made me a better kayak angler because of it. It's kind of that feeling now of oh, I did it out there in those conditions, I can do it about anywhere type feeling. It makes those situations that used to be, a little bit sketchy to you, or you might be a little bit apprehensive, it makes them feel like no big deal now because you've pushed yourself out of that comfort zone. I've been on way bigger water and way bigger rollers and that type of stuff. This little windy day up on my normal river, that's nothing now. And I think that comfort helps you fish better. It helps you maneuver better. And ultimately, I think you're safer because you're calmer in a lot more situations and you're growing as a kayak angler. So maybe for you, that just means getting away from your smaller ponds and tiny lakes and going and fishing a big state park lake for once or something like that. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you're a pond or a lake angler most of the time and you want to branch branch out and get into a little bit more moving water. Just pushing your boundaries when it comes to the body of water itself, I think is a fun thing to add to your bucket list, again, for the 10,000th time, as long as you are safe about it. Okay, let's get to our final kind of normal quote unquote thing here before we get into a little bit more uncommon things that I'm going to add to this list. Now, a common one that you hear a lot of times is like, I want to catch a fish in all 50 states. It's kind of like, that same old bucket list of like, I want to go watch a baseball game in all of the MLB stadiums in the country. Like, that's a really cool goal. And if you travel a ton, then maybe you do have the means to do stuff like that. Again, I do not. I travel very, very little. Like, I probably go out of state maybe 3 times a year on average, basically for ICAST, the Bassmaster Classic, and then, a small family vacation, and that's it. So would I like to go out and catch fish in all 50 states? Yeah, I think that would be awesome. But am I ever going to do that in my lifetime, me and how I live? No, I'm not. I'm never going to go to Alaska. I'm never going to go to Hawaii or Idaho or New Mexico or any of those. I'm just being realistic. I'm not going to end up in any of those places. So my version of this common bucket list goal is that I want to catch a fish in 20 states. I think I could do 20 states in my lifetime, and I think that would be pretty darn cool. And right now, this might shock a lot of you as often as I fish and having a show and everything like that, but I really haven't caught fish in that many states. If I think right off the top of my head, obviously Ohio, because I live here. I've caught bass in Florida because I go hop around some ponds and stuff when we're on vacation sometimes. New York when I went up to fish with Bailey last year. Pennsylvania when we went to the Susky. Oklahoma when I went out there for the Bassmaster Classic, I snuck around and caught a couple fish. Indiana when Ryan and I took our kayaks over there to fish the White River a couple years ago. And then Kentucky, I think, when I went down and spoke at the Kayak Adventure Series last year. I stopped on my way home to fish a creek that I just saw on the way. And that's a really good example of how I'm realistically going to be able to cross a lot of these states off my list. It's not destination fishing. This was like, I was driving down there to speak. I went down there, I spoke at the seminar, I got in my truck to drive all the way back to Ohio, and on my way, I saw this juicy little creek. So I naturally pulled over, I grabbed a rod from the back of my truck, and I literally took my shoes off and started walking in that creek barefoot to try and catch any fish that were in there. And guess what? I caught like 4 or 5 pretty decent smallmouth in about 15 minutes just tromping around. Now, is that the smartest thing in the world, jumping into a creek barefoot where there's probably glass and all kinds of stuff in there? No, it's probably not. But guess what? I knocked Kentucky off of my bucket list while I just happened to be passing through, and that's kind of fun. So by my count, I think that means I've caught fish in at least 7 states. I think that's my number right now, 7. That's kind of crazy. You would think it would be a lot more, but it's really not. So that just goes to show how hard it would be for someone like me to hit one of those really high numbers of like all 50 states. That's just not going to happen. So I think for me, it's 20. 20 would be fun. I'd love to hit some big names off that list. I'd love to go to Texas, Alabama, South Carolina. I've never caught a bass in Michigan, ironically. So I need to get up there and fish Lake St. Clair, Tennessee. There's so many good states that I would love to fish, but I realistically think in my lifetime, 20 is probably my doable number. And I'm sure for a lot of you listening, your number is different. There are probably a lot of you listening that have already caught fish in 20 different states. That's great. Maybe your number should be 30 or 40, or maybe you do have the chance to cross all 50 off your bucket list. That would be amazing. Everybody's number is different, but the key is to set a number that realistically works with where you are in life and your lifestyle and what that will allow. Okay, so those are our pretty standard bucket list items, sort of middle of the road. Some of those may or may not be kind of cliche, but it's just our toned down version of those that I think we can actually hit. Now let's hit a couple random bucket list items for me personally that might spur up some ideas for some of you that are out there listening. So one of my weird ones is I want to visit the Berkeley facility at Spirit Lake, and that is in the Midwest somewhere. I think it's in Iowa, but I've heard of how they do the research and the testing at that facility. It's decades and decades old. They've done some really cool stuff there in terms of seeing how fish react to baits and stuff like that. Now, again, they're a bait company, so obviously, some of that stuff might be a little biased, but I would love to see how they do things over there, and it really seems like one of the coolest places in the world if you are like a bait nerd like I am, and you would just like to see behind the scenes how some of these companies do what they do. Now, it's not open to the public, so I'm going to have to find like an inn there, but the facility is legendary, and I would just love to see it at some point. Now for you, that might be something as easy as like writing up one of your local bait makers and asking if you can go see the facility or see behind the scenes at how they make your favorite baits. I don't know if that's just too much tailored to me, but I think that would be something very cool. I'm sure there are probably some of you out there that could kind of agree. Another one is I would like to go on an electrofishing boat at least once. Again, I think this is probably fairly doable if you just ask the right people. Our local DNR and our wildlife researchers, they use shock boats or electrofishing to sample fish and do their research projects. That would be so much fun to be a part of and tag along and see that whole process, because they obviously go through these big bodies of water. They use these big electrodes or whatever they are that they shove down in the water, and the fish kind of get stunned and they float up to the top, and then you get to net and sample these fish, whether they're tagging them, whether they're just recording them, whether they're looking for what they're eating and their stomach contents. I think just being on an electrofishing boat and seeing that in action would be really cool. Along the same lines, I just think it would be really fun to visit the Ohio DNR. I think it's in Columbus, and see what it is that they do day to day, and just kind of meet the people behind the scenes of these fisheries that I get to enjoy. I know that's a weird one, but again, I would love to like go there and see what the fisheries managers and the biologists and, the lawmakers and stuff like that are doing day to day, because I think it's kind of easy for us out there on the water or whatever. We can, kind of complain sometimes about the DNR or Mr. Green Pants or whatever that's coming over to write you a ticket. And there's a lot more to the DNR and the Division of Wildlife than just your park rangers or, your game wardens, who, by the way, are doing their job as they should. If you're a law-abiding citizen, you should like to see the game wardens out. They shouldn't be a negative thing. So that kind of stuff. I would love to see what the Department of Natural Resources or the Division of Wildlife really does behind the scenes. I think that would be a cool day to go and shadow some of them. I'd also like to attend a fish stocking at a local lake at some point, and not like a trout day or a derby or something like that where all those fish die, but go to like one of the big state park ramps or whatever where they wheel in the big truck and they start shooting thousands of fish out of a tube into this lake. I think that would be cool to see at least once. And again, I know some of this stuff is kind of nerdy, but it's doable, it's attainable, and they're things that I would like to experience at one point or another. So, if you go to a local lake and you see them stocking, muskie or bass or wipers or whatever it is into that lake, and then you come back 10 years later and you catch one of those, you might have been there when they stocked that fish in the lake and had a really cool kind of full circle moment. Or it could be, the grandparents or the great grandparents of that fish were the fish that you watched get stocked into that lake. But either way, again, you do have this kind of closing the loop moment of like, oh, I was here when these fish were introduced or these fish were being stocked, and now I'm seeing the fruits of that labor 5-10 years later or whatever it is. I think that could be cool. Another odd one for me is I would like to marshal either a Major League Fishing or a Bassmaster Elite Series event at some point. They have marshals that ride along in the boat all day long that make sure the anglers are following the rules and all of that stuff. They just are, I think, from what I know, random people that either sign up or pay for that opportunity, or Bassmaster lifetime members, or I don't know how they get chosen, but they're just regular people. So I think that would be a ton of fun to experience and learn from one of those pros by watching their every move on the water for a day or two. And then my final quote unquote off the wall or odd one here is going to be one that might be a little bit more of a longer shot, but I feel like in my lifetime it's probably doable at some point if I fish enough, and it's to catch a tagged fish. I want to catch like a smallmouth or a largemouth that has a tracking tag on it, where I get to report that fish back to the study. So, there's like lip tags or whatever they have where you call the number and then you report them in, not for like the money or anything. I know sometimes there's money involved, but just because it would be so cool to catch a fish and potentially know, part or all of that fish's history, where and when it was tagged, its movements, those are things that we very rarely get with a catch or any sort of history from that fish in general. Unless you're like us and you have, some pictures of some fish with some very distinct markings that you can then photo match years apart, you really don't have any way of getting that fish's backstory when you catch it. You just get that really cool moment with that fish and then you let it go and it's over. And I think as a guy that enjoys, the science-y part of things or the tracking, the real information heavy part of fishing, I think it would be really cool to knock off my bucket list, catch a tagged fish and get a little bit more history with that specific fish. So now my question is to you all, what's on your realistic bucket list, with the key word being realistic? I'm genuinely curious. I hope this spurs some, thoughts or some conversation with some of you of like, what are some things that I would like to do fishing wise? It doesn't always have to be, oh, I'd like to catch a 10-pound largemouth, or oh, I'd like to catch a 7-pound smallmouth. They can be these kind of more attainable, more controllable things sometimes, things that are really within your wheelhouse and not left up to just chance or the fish gods of maybe happening someday. So what's on your list? Shoot me an email or a message on Instagram or Facebook. If you do email me, it's tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. Let me know what you're adding to your realistic bucket list, because some of those things might end up making it to mine too, and I'd be curious what some of yours are. But that wraps us up today. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate you all. As always, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can leave us a review, that helps a ton. On Apple or Spotify, you can leave a 5-star review. On Apple, you can type in a little something there if you want to. Again, that just helps the show continue to be found on Apple and continue to be pushed out to people. I appreciate you all. You can go find us on the web, tackletalkpodcast.com, and we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2019. For more, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.